tonight. As Democrats show divisions over Joe Biden's presidential campaign.
It doesn't matter who they nominate because we are going to beat any one of them in thundering landslides.
Donald Trump hits the campaign trail and hints at a VP pick. Plus,
when you step out of your vehicle, it's like stepping your entire body out into an oven.
The dangerous heat wave facing millions of Americans. And the latest on the ground as Israel fights to remove Hamas from Gaza. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. President Joe Biden is facing more calls to drop out of the election. Good evening and welcome to Faith Nation from CBN's headquarters in Virginia Beach. I'm Lori Johnson. With President Biden determined to fight for another 4 years, Democrats face a hard choice whether to stick with the commander-in-chief or call on him to drop out. Former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi today stopped short of a full endorsement of Biden's race for the White House. She urged the president to make a decision before time runs out.
It's up to the president to decide if he is going to run. We're all encouraging him to make that decision because time is running short.
At least 8 House Democrats are calling on Biden to bow out of the race, but others, including Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, are standing with the president. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is enjoying the Democratic panic.
The radical left Democrat Party is divided in chaos and having a full-scale breakdown, all because they can't decide which of their candidates is more unfit to be president, sleepy, crooked Joe Biden or laughing Kamala.
During that rally in Miami, Trump hinted he could choose Senator Marco Rubio to be his running mate. Ohio Senator J.D. Vance and North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum are also rumored to be top contenders. Trump is expected to officially announce his VP pick ahead of the Republican National Convention, which kicks off on Monday. CBN News chief political analyst David Brody joins us now for more. David, Democrats are running out of time. How do undecided voters view this division within the Democratic Party, and what can Biden do to turn things around?
Well, he can stop making unforced errors. I mean, that's for starters. Undecided voters are not happy with what's going on, but more importantly, happy. And it was interesting. I was struck by Nancy Pelosi going on MSNBC today. First of all, if you're going to go on MSNBC and talk about Joe Biden, you better have a concrete answer. She did not have one. She said it's up to the president to make a decision. Well, hold on for a second. This just in to Nancy Pelosi. Joe Biden has made a decision. He says, I'm in it. I'm not going anywhere. So what decision does she really want him to make? Look, I think this is just a matter of time. We're just waiting for Biden to finally get the email, if you will. I think it'll come more in the form of a direct conversation with some top House and Senate colleagues.
So what was your impression of Biden giving the NATO speech, which was very short and on teleprompter? And more importantly, what are your thoughts about his press conference tomorrow? Won't that be much more of an important test?
Well, there's no doubt about that. Short and teleprompter, 2 words that Joe Biden likes, though, quite frankly, even on the teleprompter, it's a bit iffy. So it's going to be a much different scenario later this week when he gives that solo press conference. What does that mean exactly? Well, we know it's going to be more than 2 questions, but will it be 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours? Listen, I'm not betting, Lori, on 2 hours, maybe 30 minutes. We'll see how he does. But he's got to play error-free baseball, if you will, the rest of the way. And let's be honest, we know he's not going to do that. He didn't even do that when he was in his 40s and 50s. He was always gaffe prone. Imagine what it is now. This is not good for Joe Biden.
Well, President Trump is expected to announce his VP pick any day now. Who do you think he has his eye on the most? And what's he looking for in a running mate this time around?
Well, he definitely wants loyalty. But number one, first and foremost, someone that can step in and be president. I think there's part of it is to pass the MAGA mantle, if you will. But I think those 3 qualities are important. Look, the 3 in contention, I think it's pretty clear. It's J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio, and Dr. Ben Carson is what I'm hearing. Word on the street, Lori. I don't know what street I'm looking at, but it's word on that street that Dr. Ben Carson could be the underdog wild card pick here. We'll see. J.D. Vance we can go through each one, but a few of them have their issues. But Dr. Ben Carson may be the unique pick. We'll see.
The wild card. All right, turning now to Congress. The House Freedom Caucus is shrinking. Members are either leaving or being ousted from the group due to disagreements over strategy. What direction do you see the caucus moving in, and what kind of power will they have if Trump wins in November?
Well, this has been a problem all along for the House Freedom Caucus. And I want to be clear. I mean, good for them that they're strong and moral on their principles, but the problem is when you get into a dogmatic approach, which is kind of a my way or the highway, or we're going to cause a ruckus, that may be good for fundraising, maybe good for campaigning, but it's not great for PR and politics in Washington. And that's what's kind of gone on with the Freedom Caucus. So they're having their disagreements. Look, I mean, not to get into all of this, I'll give you 10 seconds of it. But Bob Good, who's the House Freedom Caucus chairman, as you know, Lori, lost in Virginia. He's going to ask for a recount. But he was head of the House Freedom Caucus. He lost, but he was not endorsed by Trump. His opponent was endorsed by Trump. And Warren Davidson, who's in the House Freedom Caucus, did not stand by his House Freedom Caucus guy, Bob Good. He endorsed Bob Good's opponent. And so everybody's kind of playing the political, like, you should have backed me and X, Y, and Z. Oh, Lori, it's politics in Washington. Welcome to the deep state.
Never a dull moment. Can't wait to see what happens next. David, as always, thanks for your analysis.
You bet. Thanks, Lori.
Well, lawmakers are closely watching Biden's performance on the world stage during this week's NATO summit. Hoping to reassert his leadership over Western allies, the president vowed to defend every inch of NATO territory.
Right now, Russia is on a wartime footing with regard to defense production. They're significantly ramping up their production of weapons, munitions, and vehicles. And they're doing it with the help of China, North Korea, and Iran. We cannot, in my view, we cannot allow the alliance to fall behind.
In his speech at the summit's opening ceremony Tuesday, Biden also pledged to give Ukraine new air defenses in its war against Russia. Turning now to the Middle East, the IDF is calling on all civilians to leave Gaza City now, a sign that Israel's campaign against Hamas is far from over and a bigger offensive could be on the horizon. The military is pounding targets across the entire enclave. Israel says it's pursuing Hamas terrorists that have regrouped in areas where they were previously driven out. This morning, airstrikes in central Gaza reportedly killed 20 Palestinians, including 6 women and 3 children. In the 9 months since the war began, Israel says it has destroyed more than half of Hamas's forces.
We eliminated or wounded 60% of the Hamas terrorists. We disbanded the 24 battalions, or the vast majority of them. We have returned half of the hostages, and we are determined to return the rest.
Meanwhile, in Qatar, high-stakes negotiations to free Israeli hostages and declare a ceasefire. Israel and Hamas appear to be moving closer to a truce in recent days, but gaps remain. Hamas has dropped a long-standing demand that Israel agree to a permanent end to the fighting before a deal is signed. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he's committed to stopping the fighting so long as Israel is able to restart the war later to destroy Hamas. In Lebanon, Hezbollah's leader said he would also end the group's daily attacks on Israel if a Gaza ceasefire is secured. Well, no matter where you live in the U.S., chances are it's way too hot. A large part of the country today is under excessive heat warnings and advisories, with temperatures reaching over 120 degrees out west. The dangerous heat wave is moving east. Washington correspondent Caitlin Burke has the details.
For the second day in a row here in the nation's capital, the feels-like temperature reaching about 110 degrees. The excessive heat and oppressive humidity adding up to be a dangerous combination.
It's too hot for me. Yeah, it's like steaming hot, and you just feel dizzy all the time. Yeah. You really cannot do anything.
Out west, some cities now entering their 6th consecutive day of record-breaking temperatures. Death Valley National Park on the California-Nevada border topping 128 degrees.
Death Valley, it is a dry heat, But that dry heat is pretty intense. So when you step out of your vehicle, it's like stepping your entire body out into an oven.
I don't know how anything can survive out here.
Temps remain between 10 to 30 degrees above average across Washington, Oregon, California, Nevada, and Arizona. The record-breaking heat taking a heavy toll, with at least 6 people reported dead in Oregon, a suspected heat exposure death in California, and in Arizona, a 4-month-old baby reported dead from heat exhaustion after being on a boat in 120-degree temperatures. The heat is also affecting infrastructure. This New York City bridge became stuck in the open position because heat expanded the steel. And in Washington, a state highway buckled under soaring temperatures. Meanwhile, in Texas, blistering heat blankets the state as many remain without power due to Hurricane Beryl.
It is over 100 degrees. It's going to hit 106, 108 with the heat index. And so when you're in this hot, humid condition, and whether it's our seniors, whether it's individuals with health vulnerabilities that may need to plug in oxygen tanks, not having power is just, the heat is oppressive here.
Record heat is expected to continue out west over the next few days. Here on the East Coast, the end of the week expected to bring a brief reprieve. But as we head into the weekend, things will again be heating back up. Caitlin Burke, CBN News, Washington.
Coming up, no smartphones in the classroom, the latest push to improve students' grades and mental health. Welcome back. When students in Virginia return to the classroom, they'll have to leave something behind, their smartphones. Governor Glenn Youngkin has ordered public schools across the state to go cell phone free. He says the goal is to promote a healthier and more focused educational environment where every child is free to learn. All schools in his state will need to implement cell phone free policies by January of next year. Virginia is just the latest to implement a cell phone ban. New York City is considering a similar policy, and Los Angeles already approved restrictions on cell phones in the classroom last month. And joining us now with more insight into the study is Melissa Henson of the Parents Television and Media Council. Melissa, what's your reaction to banning cell phones at school? Do you think it's a good idea?
I think it's a fantastic idea, and I hope more school districts across the country follow suit. Because what we have seen is not only challenges confronting our kids' mental health challenges because of their constant presence, their constant access to cell phones and social media throughout the day. We're seeing problems of cyberbullying. We're seeing increased anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation among children. But it's not just the mental health challenges. 72% of teachers, according to a Pew survey that was conducted last fall, say that phones in the classroom is a significant distraction, and it's a disruption to the learning environment.
Well, so how would this work? Do kids put their phones in a box when they walk into the class and then pick it up as they leave? It seems like there would be a lot of ways kids could cheat, doesn't it?
There probably are. And in fact, I understand that on YouTube, there are a lot of instructional videos about how to get past these yonder pouches that are being used in a lot of school districts for kids to lock up their phones. But there are a number of different tools that are out there that are available to schools that are achievable. They're pretty foolproof. Lockers apparently are much more effective than the yonder pouches. But this is all sort of new territory for a lot of school districts, and there's going to be some trial and error. But I think what's going to be critical for the success of this program is that there's consistency. So, for example, in some school districts, it's, first time you get caught with a cell phone when you're not supposed to have one, you get a warning and a call home. But the second time, we confiscate your device. So both parents and kids need to know that the schools are serious and that they're going to be enforcing this policy.
It seems like some parents would be concerned for safety reasons about their child not having a phone with them in case of an emergency. What do you think about flip phones? Comedian Jerry Seinfeld and others say they allow their kids to have flip phones because that solves the safety concern issue, but it also prevents them from accessing the internet. What do you think about that?
Well, I think flip phones are a better alternative to smartphones for kids because you don't see the same kind of anxiety and hyper awareness of notifications and so forth that kids have when they have smartphones. But better yet, when we were growing up, our parents didn't have constant access to us. And, Jonathan Haidt came out with this book a couple months ago, The Anxious Generation. And he posits that it's a combination of kids being overprotected in the real world and underprotected online that is causing all these problems for our kids. So maybe it would be better for us as parents to step back and say, we don't need to be helicopter parenting our children. We need to give them a little bit of freedom to navigate the world without us constantly supervising, constantly texting, constantly checking in on them.
That is so true. It's a great comparison, being over-supervised in some certain circumstances and then under-supervised when they're actually online. Melissa, thank you so much for your insights. Great to talk to you. Appreciate you being here.
Thanks.
Well, up next, these twins spent 10 years as frozen embryos. Meet the couple who adopted them and gave them a chance at life after this. The abortion debate has sparked new arguments over in vitro fertilization. A majority of Americans support the practice that helps childless couples conceive. Others are divided on the morality of a procedure that often involves the destruction of frozen embryos. Charlene Aaron reports on a possible solution where everyone wins.
Millions of couples deal with infertility, and more are turning to science in the hope of growing their families. The latest U.S. statistics show that in 2021, in vitro fertilization resulted in the births of more than 86,000, or 2% of babies nationwide. Amidst growing debate over IVF, a lesser-known option called embryo adoption is also gaining ground. For 10 years, Rodney and Mary Leah Miller struggled to have a family.
Attempt after attempt, negative pregnancy test after negative pregnancy test, you begin to wonder, will this ever happen for us?
That question led the Alabama couple to undergo several rounds of in vitro fertilization, which all failed. Then in May of 2020, friends told them about embryo adoption, a process which involves a woman receiving one or several donated frozen embryos.
We both just had a peace about us, and we're very confident that this is how the Lord was going to start our family.
The Millers connected with the Snowflake program, which helps people with embryos in frozen storage to offer them for adoption. While their first try resulted in miscarriage, the second proved doubly successful. 2 years ago, twins Dalton and Mary Elizabeth, who had been frozen for 10 years, were born via C-section.
To see that promise realized on December 23rd, 2022 was, it was truly a miracle, but also just representative of God's faithfulness.
Concerns about this technology have moved to the forefront this year, especially over the large number of embryos which may never be implanted. In February, the Alabama Supreme Court ignited the debate by ruling frozen embryos created during IVF to be children. Then, during its annual meeting in June, the Southern Baptist Convention passed a resolution expressing compassion for couples faced with infertility, as well as moral caution for the procedure. Ethicist Jason Thacker advised the SBC on the matter.
We're not condemning the practice outright, but we're saying we must kind of think cautiously and cultivate wisdom for how we navigate these devastating realities.
Nightlight Christian Adoption Agency, home to the Snowflake program, estimates more than 1.5 million embryos remain in frozen storage nationwide. CBN News asked Beth Button, the program's executive director, about the possibility of finding adoptive families for all those embryos.
It really depends on how many of those embryos end up being donated for adoption. So many of the embryos that are in frozen storage, the family who created them could potentially be still planning to use them at a later point for reproduction.
Budden says many who support embryo adoption are unaware of what's involved in the practice.
And unfortunately, it's just part of the everyday practice of in vitro fertilization that embryos are discarded.
Ethical issues that can be difficult, especially for many Christians.
as we faced them and made very difficult decisions with our very first specialist that we spoke with on the number of embryos that we were willing to fertilize and that we wouldn't be discarding.
Thacker sees the widespread acceptance of in vitro fertilization as the next stance in the fight for the unborn. A recent Gallup poll found that 82% believe IVF to be morally acceptable. 10% viewed the procedure as morally wrong, with the remainder expressing no opinion. And when it comes to destroying frozen embryos created by in vitro fertilization, 49% believe it is moral to do so, while 43% disagree.
What we're seeing not only in the state of Alabama, but other states rushing to kind of usher in protections for IVF, access to IVF. We see the push at the federal level to federalize access to IVF.
Meanwhile, the Millers are grateful for their growing family, as they're expecting a second set of twins later this year.
Look at these beautiful blessings the Lord has given us. We spend our time thanking him for the science and everything that he has provided to make this possible.
Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
Coming up, a special look at the San Diego Zoo's new arrivals next on Faith Nation. And finally tonight on Faith Nation, a look at the first pandas to enter the United States in more than 2 decades. The San Diego Zoo recently welcomed a pair of giant pandas from China, the first of the species to come stateside in 21 years. The pair is receiving fresh bamboo to help them acclimate to their new environment, and vets from both China and the United States are monitoring their transition. The pandas are off limits to the public for now, but the zoo says you'll be able to visit them soon. And aren't they adorable? Well, that's going to do it for Faith Nation. Thanks for joining us. We hope to see you back here again tomorrow.